welcome to the small shed, where today we're going to the big shed. See you in a minute. Now it's the 19th of January today. This is a Wednesday. The Many Sheds shed is opening this week. They opened up on Monday. I'm down there today supervising, and this is the first week they're back after Christmas because of COVID worries and things like that. But for me, it's the first time I've been back to the shed since the end of October, I think. With my wife being poorly, we stayed away from any sort of mixing, both pre-op and post-op. And this is really the first time I've been out in that period. So it's all a bit strange. So I thought I'd take a look at what was the last job I had before I stopped going to the shed. It was slightly unusual in that we opened up on a Friday for a group from a local hospice in Bromsgrove. And we had 4 of them down, 4 guys down to, we thought we'd do the caddy build with them because it was something that you could do in a couple of hours, and it took them away from their hospice surroundings and gave them a chance to sort of forget about things for a while. So what I'd done was we'd put together 5 of the kits for the little caddies, and what I've done, I've made it up so that there's a bottle of glue, brush, tin of clear varnish, and they came in, and effectively all they did was just basically glued it together. I've made some little blocks of wood that go with the kits now that keep that bit upright while you're doing it, because there was always a risk that would be glued in crooked. And we had a pleasant afternoon for 2 or 3 hours. You can sort of glue this thing together in about half, 3/4 of an hour, something like that. So we did that with them first, and then while it was drying in clamps, we sat them down, had a cup of tea and a chat and a general bit of chinwag, and then by that time they were dry. They came back and gave them all a coat of varnish. This quick drying stuff goes off within about 10 or 15 minutes. So as a result, they all went home at about 4, half 4 with a caddy. And what I'd done beforehand, I'd got all the names of the people who were coming, and we'd sort of personalised them all so that they'd each got their own. And one of the guys who didn't come because he was poorly, I think, I decided that we'd carry on and make his caddy up, and I could drop it off round at the hospice when it was done. So I'm going to glue that together now for the rest of the day, I think. It was quite interesting and again quite sort of touching that one of the guys who was a lot younger than I am, who's been going through an awful lot of problems with chemo and that over the last year or more, and he was joking and sort of said, well, this will be ideal for me. He says, I've just bought an IKEA bedroom side table. He said, and I forgot to get a thing to go inside the top drawer to fit all my medication and phones and things in, and I sort of said, well, you know, it'll have to be a big drawer. And he says, oh, I think it'll fit. And he sent a photo through the other day of the caddy in his drawer. So it was yeah, quite an interesting day, seeing people who are dealing with, as I mentioned, far worse problems than most of us have. So I'm just going to glue this together now, finish it off for him, and that's probably me done for the rest of the day. Right, so that sorted the guys from Primrose, but it left us with the problem that we'd got no stock at all by then. I'd originally made 20 of those kits, and we'd sold some at the local craft fair, and that left us with the half dozen that I had to scrape together to get those. So while I was at home, I decided to get the timber out. I'd taken some sheets of ply home to cut up and make a start on making the kits at home, but obviously I hadn't got quite the same facilities, so I had to change things around a bit on the way that I did it. Right, that's a good afternoon's work. There's 44 bases there. There'll be a bit of wastage somewhere down the line, but it's well on the way to making 40 of these trug things, which is all I've got to do now. He says all is to make 80 of the sides, 80 of the ends, 80 of the little dividers, and another 40 odd handle parts, and we can start and put the kits together. I just want to make probably half a dozen or so for the Christmas stuff that they're selling at the moment, and the rest can go into store, but it doesn't take up so much room now as the big sheets of ply did, and it means that if I get them all routed out, we can just go and grab a kit every time anybody wants a trug and caddy, and you can make one within an hour or so. Now when it comes to the handles on these caddies that I'm putting together, I normally in the past have used this little jig that I built where I put a piece of timber in there, I put that on top, and then I ran round it with a router with a guide bearing on it, which was on the router side of the router bit, if you like. And I ran into a problem yesterday when I was trying to get these things made, in that I couldn't find the cutter that I'd got, the router bit, with the bearing underneath effectively underneath the cutting part. So I'm having to compromise. I've got one of the bearing cutters I've got with the wheel on top, but of course that won't work if I put that in a router. I suppose I could put that underneath and then cut out, but it's not really very ideal, so I'm dispensing with that at the moment. I've actually cut out, marked them out first, and then just cut out roughly on the bandsaw the outer edges of the handles, and I've hogged out the middle with the pillar drill. And what I'm going to do now is double-sided tape these onto the template, and then I can run around with the template on the top attached to that, and then just work with the bearing on that on the router table. It takes a minute or two longer. It's not quite as easy and quick to replicate, but in this case it'll do the job. It gets me out of the immediate problem. I looked up online to get one of the router bits from my favourite tool station or wherever, but unfortunately they were out of stock at the moment, without a fairly long flight journey somewhere by car, so needs must. You have to adapt sometimes to these things. As I say, this will work just as well, just a little differently, and perhaps take a minute or two longer. But the upside is that while I've got the router table out, I can do all the roundovers probably quicker than I would have done them by hand using the router that I used to use before. So we'll see how it works. Let's go around the outside first. So it's just as quick once you've got it set up. It's just taking a little bit longer to get all the hogging out done and everything else. But now I can put the roundover bit in the table as well and get all the rounding over done on the table. And so there we had it. We've got a set of about 40 kits ready for use, either in making them up for craft fairs or even doing more of the Friday afternoon exercises with local schools, groups from hospices, groups from any other community, scouts, things like that. So it gives us a sort of a slightly different way of doing things in the future if we want to. Gives us a bit of stock, and it's got some of the sheets of plywood out the way and all finished up ready to go. So I hope that was of interest. Sorry it was a scrappy one again. This is stuff that's been cobbled together from things that I was filming at the time I was not going to shed and not doing a lot at home, and therefore it's a bit patchy here and there, but hopefully next week we'll have something different, and I look forward to seeing you then. Bye.